The first thing Ava did after signing the $20 million contract was throw my clothes into the hallway. Not metaphorically. She actually opened the bedroom closet, pulled my shirts from their hangers, and dropped them one by one onto the floor, while the champagne from the celebration was still sitting untouched on the kitchen counter. "You need to leave." I stood in the doorway and watched her. She was still wearing the black dress she'd worn to the contract dinner, the same dress I'd helped her choose 3 nights earlier because she couldn't decide between two. Her $20 million contract was finally real. And apparently, so was the fact that she no longer needed me. "Ava," I said quietly, "what are you doing?" She pulled another shirt from the closet. "What does it look like?" She dropped the shirt. Then she looked at me. There was no hesitation in her expression, no guilt, no uncertainty. Just the strange confidence of someone who had suddenly convinced herself that everything she'd accomplished had been accomplished alone. "I don't need someone holding me back anymore," she said. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because there was something she didn't know, something she'd never thought to ask, something that would reach her less than 48 hours later. She believed the $20 million contract had changed her life. She was right. She just had no idea whose life it had changed. Because the company that had awarded Ava the contract didn't choose her because she was the most qualified person who applied. They chose her because of a recommendation, my recommendation. And the person whose signature ultimately made that recommendation possible wasn't her. It was mine. My name was buried beneath 3 holding companies, 2 investment vehicles, and a private board structure that Ava had never seen. She knew me as Ethan Cole, 32 years old, quiet, ordinary. The guy who drove a 10-year-old sedan. The guy who worked from home. The guy she sometimes joked was between things. She thought I was unemployed. She thought I was lucky to have her. She thought I'd spent the last 2 years watching her build something while doing nothing with my own life. What she didn't know was that I'd spent those same 2 years building the company that was about to become her largest client. And the $20 million contract she was celebrating wasn't the beginning of my story. It was the moment her story collided with mine. If you've ever had someone underestimate you because they couldn't see what you were building, stay with me. Because this one doesn't end where you think it does. My name is Ethan Cole, and for the last 3 years, I had been living a life that looked deliberately unimpressive. There was a reason for that. I wasn't hiding because I was ashamed. I was hiding because I had learned something early in my career. People treat visible success differently from invisible success. If you walk into a room wearing a $10,000 watch, people immediately decide you're important. If you quietly own the company that employs half of the people in that room, they might not notice until you say something. I preferred the second option. Ava preferred the first. That difference didn't matter when we met. At least, I didn't think it did. We met at a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday morning. She was sitting near the window with a laptop open and 3 empty coffee cups around her. I was waiting for an order. She looked up and I asked if the chair across from her was taken. She said no, it wasn't. That was how it started. No dramatic music, no expensive restaurant, no carefully planned introduction. Just 2 people sitting across from each other while rain hit the windows. Ava was ambitious. That was the first thing I noticed. She had an energy that made everything sound urgent. Every problem was a challenge. Every challenge was an opportunity. She talked about building a consulting company that would eventually compete with firms 10 times its size. At the time, she had 4 employees, 1 office, and a bank account that was frequently closer to empty than she admitted. I liked that about her. She didn't have much, but she wanted more. And I understood that, because I wanted more too. I just didn't need everyone to know. 6 months into our relationship, Ava started talking about a massive government infrastructure modernization program. The contract was nearly $20 million. The project involved cybersecurity, data management, and digital infrastructure for several regional facilities. Winning it would completely transform her company. She had been trying to get into the bidding process for almost a year. There was one problem. Her company didn't have the required track record. The larger firms bidding against her had been operating for 15 or 20 years. Ava's company had been around for 4. She was convinced she could beat them on strategy. I believe she could too, but I also knew something she didn't. The organization overseeing the contract had recently changed its valuation criteria. They weren't simply looking for the largest company. They wanted a smaller firm capable of moving quickly. That changed everything. I knew because I'd been in the room when the criteria were discussed, not as Ava's boyfriend, as a shareholder. The company managing the procurement process was one of the largest clients of Meridian Systems, and Meridian Systems was one of the companies I'd quietly acquired through a private investment structure 2 years earlier. Ava never knew. She assumed I spent my days consulting for small businesses. Sometimes she complained that I didn't have a real career. I never corrected her. 3 months before the bidding deadline, Ava came home frustrated. I was sitting at the kitchen table. "They said no," she said. "They're going to give it to someone else. They said they want a company that's handled projects this size." "Can you prove your team can?" I asked. "That's not how procurement works," she replied. Then I said, "Sometimes it is." She stared at me. "What does that mean?" "Nothing," I said. She shook her head. "You always do that. You always say something like you know more than you're telling me." I smiled. She didn't smile back. That night, I made a phone call, not to Ava, but to Marcus Reed. Marcus was the chief executive of Meridian Systems. He had known me for 6 years. He also knew that Ava's company was capable of handling the project. But he couldn't simply hand her a contract. That would be illegal. So I didn't ask him to. I asked him to make sure the evaluation process was based on the actual criteria rather than reputation. That's all. The rest was up to Ava. And she delivered. Her team submitted a proposal that was genuinely good. Not because I wrote it, not because I gave her confidential information, because she had built a capable company. I simply made sure the door wasn't closed before she got there. 2 weeks later, Ava received the email. She had made the final round. She screamed, actually screamed. Then she jumped onto the couch and wrapped her arms around me. "We did it," I laughed. "You did it." "No, we did it." She kissed me. For the first time in months, I thought maybe she understood. Maybe the money wouldn't change her. Maybe success wouldn't create distance between us. But I was wrong. The final presentation happened on a Thursday. Ava wore a navy suit. I drove her there. She spent the entire ride reviewing her notes. At the entrance, she turned toward me. "Wish me luck." "Good luck." She smiled. "I'll see you tonight." I watched her disappear through the doors. 4 hours later, she called. "We got it." I knew before she said it, but I still asked, "How much?" She said 20 million and was crying. I could hear people celebrating in the background. She had done it, and I was genuinely happy for her. That evening, we went to dinner. Her entire team was there. Champagne, speeches, photographs. Everyone kept calling Ava the youngest founder in the room to win a contract of that size. She loved every second of it. At one point, she stood beside the window overlooking the city. I walked toward her. She didn't turn around. "Can you believe this?" she asked. Then she finally looked at me. "Do you know what this means? I'm not small anymore." I smiled. "You were never small." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked back at the city. And that's when I noticed the first change. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking beyond me, toward the people in the room, toward the people she had spent years trying to impress. The next morning, everything changed. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Investors, journalists, potential clients, people she'd spent years trying to reach. Suddenly, everyone wanted Ava, and Ava wanted everyone. She started receiving invitations to private dinners, executive events, industry conferences, networking groups. She bought a new car, then a new wardrobe, then rented a larger office. None of that bothered me. Success should be enjoyed. What bothered me was how quickly she began rewriting the story of how she got there. One evening, she was on the phone with one of her friends. Honestly, I knew I could do it, she said on the call. I was sitting across the room. She didn't mention the nights I'd stayed up awake helping her organize her thoughts. She didn't mention the introductions I'd made. She didn't mention the research I'd done. She didn't mention anything. She didn't have to say all that. After all, the contract was hers. But something about the way she said it made me realize she had started believing a different version. One where she had done everything alone. 3 weeks after the contract was signed, she came home late. I was still awake. "You're late," I said worriedly. She dropped her purse. Then she looked at me. "You should probably find somewhere else to stay tomorrow." I thought I'd misheard her. "What?" "I've been thinking." "About what?" "Us." I stood. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." "Then why are you asking me to leave?" She sighed. "Because we're going in different directions." I stared at her. She continued. "My life is changing, and yours isn't." There it was, the sentence that explained everything. She had started measuring people by visible momentum. "You think I'm holding you back?" I asked. "No, I didn't say that," she replied. "I don't have to," I said. She looked uncomfortable. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You were right for the version of me that needed someone." I didn't respond, because there was no point. She had already decided. The next morning, she went to work. That evening, she came home with a bottle of champagne. I assumed she had changed her mind. She hadn't. The champagne was for her. She had received another major opportunity. A magazine wanted to feature her. She told me she was going to celebrate with her team. I asked whether she wanted me there. She looked at me. No, that answer told me everything. The night she threw me out was 2 days later. It happened after a private dinner with several executives. Ava came home around 11. She was still wearing the black dress. She placed her purse on the counter. "We need to talk." She had already made the decision. "I want you out by tomorrow morning." I asked why. She gave me the same answer. "I'm building something bigger now." I looked at her. "You're really doing this?" "I have to," she replied. "Why? Because of the contract?" "No, because of everything." Then she said the sentence that stayed with me. "You've had 3 years to become something, Ethan." I didn't answer. She continued. "I can't keep waiting." Right there, I almost told her. I almost said, "Ava, the company that gave you $20 million exists partly because of me." I almost told her about Meridian, about the holding companies, about everything about me. I almost told her that the people she had spent the last 3 weeks trying to impress had been asking me for approval for years. But I didn't, because suddenly I realized something. If I told her now, she'd stay. Not because she loved me, because she'd understand my value. And I didn't want that. So I packed, quietly. No argument, no begging, no revenge speech. I put my clothes into 2 bags. She watched. "You're not even going to fight?" I looked at her. What would I be fighting for? She didn't answer. I picked up my bags. At the door, I turned. "Good luck, Ava." She nodded. Then I left. I spent that night in a hotel, not because I had nowhere else to go, because I needed distance. At 7:15 the next morning, my assistant called. "Meridian's board wants to know whether you intend to move forward with the expansion." I looked out the hotel window. The city was waking up. "Yes." "All right." There was a pause. Then she said, "Also, there's a question about Ava's contract." I knew what was coming, but I still asked, "What about it?" "She has been assigned Meridian's largest implementation phase." I closed my eyes. Who approved that? The board. Who signed off? She said it was Marcus. I thought for a second. "Leave it." "Are you sure?" "Yes." She paused. "Even after what happened?" I smiled faintly. "Especially after what happened." By noon, Ava was already celebrating again. She had received confirmation that the first $8 million payment would be released once implementation began. She called her mother, her friends, everyone. She told them she'd finally escaped the relationship that had been holding her back. I didn't hear her say that directly, but I knew, because someone sent me a recording I didn't ask for. It came from one of the executives who had been at dinner with her. I listened once, then deleted it. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I had already made a decision. I wasn't going to expose myself, I wasn't going to sabotage her contract, and I wasn't going to punish her. I was simply going to let her experience the consequences of believing she understood the situation, because she didn't, not even close. Quick task. If you are enjoying this story and you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, kindly like and subscribe to this channel. Thank you. Now back to the story. The first sign came the next morning. Ava arrived at her office at 8:03. Her CFO was waiting. "We have a problem." "What?" "The client has requested an emergency executive review." "Why?" "We don't know." Ava frowned. "What kind of review?" "Contract structure." "Did they find something?" "No." "Then what's the issue?" Her CFO hesitated. "They want to meet with the ownership group." Ava laughed. "That's normal." "No." She looked at him. "What?" "They specifically requested the controlling shareholder." "Why?" "We don't know." Ava picked up her phone. "Call them," she said. Her CFO did. A receptionist answered. He introduced himself, then asked to speak to Marcus Reed. The receptionist placed him on hold. 3 minutes later, Marcus came onto the line. Ava leaned closer. "Marcus, this is Ava. We were told there's an issue with our contract." "No, there's actually no issue," he replied. "Then why the review?" "Because circumstances have changed." "What circumstances?" Marcus was quiet. Then he said, "I think Ethan can explain that better than I can." Ava froze. "Ethan?" "Yes." Her CFO looked at her. "What does Ethan have to do with this?" Marcus didn't answer. He simply said, "You'll find out." Then the line went dead. Ava called me. I didn't answer. She called again. I still didn't answer. Then she sent a message. "We need to talk." I looked at it and put the phone down. 20 minutes later, another text. "Ethan, please answer." Then, "I don't understand what's happening." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied, "You'll understand soon." That was all. At 2 p.m. that afternoon, Ava received an invitation to a private executive meeting. The location was Meridian's headquarters. She arrived with her CFO and legal counsel. They were escorted to the top floor, the same floor where I'd spent countless hours over the previous 2 years. Ava had never been there. She didn't know the floor existed. The doors opened. Marcus Reed was standing at the far end of the conference room. Several executives were seated around the table, and at the head of the table was an empty chair. Ava sat down. "Where's Ethan?" Nobody answered. Then the door opened. I walked in. Ava looked at me. For several seconds, she didn't move. I was wearing a dark suit, not flashy, no expensive watch, no jewelry, nothing that would have given me away if she'd passed me on the street. But Marcus stood. Every executive in the room stood with him. Ava's face changed, slowly. I sat down. Marcus looked at her. Then he said, "Ava, I believe you two know each other." She looked at me. "Ethan?" But I didn't say anything. Marcus continued, "For the record, Ethan Cole is the founder and controlling shareholder of Meridian Strategic Holdings." Her CFO went completely still. Ava stared. "What?" Marcus continued, "Meridian Strategic Holdings owns the majority position in Meridian Systems." Ava's lips parted. "No." I finally spoke. Yes. She looked at me like she'd never seen me before. You're the controlling shareholder. Her CFO immediately began looking through his documents. Ava shook her head. No. I watched her. She was trying to make the information fit inside the version of me she had created. It couldn't. You knew about the contract. Yes, I knew the contract existed. And you helped me get it, she asked. I made sure you received a fair evaluation. Her eyes filled with something I couldn't identify. Anger, shock, regret, maybe all three. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her and said nothing. She stared at me, then whispered, I threw you out and you knew all of this. You could have stopped the contract, but you didn't. Why? I leaned back. Because you earned it. She looked confused. Then she swallowed. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. She repeated it. Ethan, I'm sorry. I looked at the woman I'd loved for 3 years. The woman who had thrown my clothes into a hallway because she thought I had nothing. And for the first time, I realized that the truth wasn't that she had underestimated my money. She had underestimated me. Those were different things. The meeting continued. Her lawyers reviewed the contract. Nothing had changed. The $20 million agreement remained valid. There was no cancellation, no hidden punishment. Ava was still getting exactly what she had earned. But now she knew something else. Every person sitting around that table had known me for years. They knew the company, they knew my investments, they knew my reputation. They had simply never associated any of that with the quiet man Ava had been dating. When the meeting ended, everyone left. Ava stayed. She sat across from me. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I thought you were... She stopped. Say it. She looked down. I thought you were unsuccessful. I thought I was carrying you. I thought you didn't have ambition. I know. She started crying. I was wrong. I looked at her. She wiped her face. Can we fix this? That question was harder than everything else, because 3 days earlier, I would have given almost anything for her to ask it. Now, I didn't know if I wanted it. I don't know. She looked at me. Do you still love me? I didn't answer immediately. Then I said, that's not the question. What is? She asked. The question you should be asking is if I trust you. She went quiet. I continued. You didn't leave because you thought I was a bad person. You left because you thought I wasn't valuable enough. She lowered her head. And now that you know what I have, you want to come back. I want you. Do you? She looked up. Yes. Would you still want me if I were exactly the man you thought I was 3 days ago? She couldn't answer. And that silence told me everything. But Ava wasn't finished. She had one more problem. Her contract had been awarded partly because her company met the project's criteria. But the implementation phase depended on a senior technical partner. That partner was Meridian Systems. And Meridian had a right to terminate the partnership if Ava's company failed compliance reviews. Ava's company had been growing so quickly that she had overlooked several internal controls. Nothing criminal, nothing catastrophic, but enough to cause problems. Her CFO called me the next morning. She has a compliance issue. How serious? Fixable, I think. Then fix it. He paused. Even after everything? Her company earned the contract, I said. Over the next 6 weeks, Ava's company survived. Not because I secretly rescued it, because she finally started listening. She hired better people, strengthened her internal controls, stopped pretending she knew everything. She learned how to delegate. She learned how to accept criticism. And perhaps most importantly, she stopped measuring her worth by how much attention she received. I never went back to the relationship, but I didn't destroy her either. That distinction mattered to me, because revenge would have made the story about her. Walking away made it about me. 3 months later, Ava requested a meeting. I agreed. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd first met. The rain was hitting the windows again. She sat across from me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. You know what's strange? I used to think the contract was the biggest thing that ever happened to me. She looked out the window. Now I think it was the moment I found out who I was. I didn't answer. She continued. I thought success meant finally becoming important enough for people to respect me, but I was wrong. She looked at me. Success doesn't make you a better person. It just gives you more opportunities to show who you already are. I smiled slightly. That's true, I said. She looked down. I'm not asking you to come back. That surprised me. Because I finally understand something, she said. You shouldn't have to prove your worth to someone before they treat you well. I nodded. She stood. Then she reached into her bag. There was an envelope. She placed it on the table. What's this? Your portion. I opened it. It was a check. I looked at her. What is this? Your share of the expenses from the apartment, the car, everything you contributed while we were together. I shook my head. You don't owe me this. I know, she smiled. I just need to know that I'm leaving this relationship without owing you anything. I pushed the envelope back. You don't. She stared at me. Are you sure? Yes. She nodded. Then she walked away. I watched her leave. And for the first time since everything happened, I felt something that wasn't anger. It was peace. 1 year later, Ava's company was worth significantly more than it had been when she won the $20 million contract. She had expanded. She hired people. She had become the kind of leader she'd always wanted to be. And she never told the public what happened. She never used my name. Neither did I. Our relationship became something neither of us discussed. A lesson. Not a scandal, not a revenge story, just a lesson. As for me, Meridian continued growing. We expanded into 3 new markets. I invested in companies that I believed in. I bought a house eventually. Not because I needed to prove anything, because I wanted a place that felt like home. But I never became the kind of person Ava had expected me to become after discovering the truth. I didn't start wearing expensive watches. I didn't buy a supercar. I didn't suddenly become obsessed with showing people how much I had. I stayed relatively quiet because I'd learned something years before Ava ever met me. The loudest person in the room isn't necessarily the most powerful. Sometimes the person everyone ignores is the person keeping the lights on. Thanks for watching. This story was made and produced by Akavox. And don't forget to like and subscribe.